Howdy ho, this is AL-BINO here today. We're going to go up in the Rio Grande River Canyon and try some fishing up towards Espanola. Actually north of Espanola, up in the gorge. A little warm, but hopefully once we get some altitude on us and get in the shade of the gorge walls, we'll be okay. So, do you feel more tired at work? Why is it that you have to work an 80-hour work week or a 60-hour work week when your parents could get away with working a 40-hour work week and their standard of living was likely higher than yours is right now? Why is it that it seems that once you're off work, all you want to do is rest, and you don't have time sometimes to do things like weed the front yard, cut the grass, grow a garden, have 2 full days with your family, or even sometimes you're too tired to go to church, mosque, or synagogue? Is anybody noticing this other than myself? I know. I'm almost 50 years old. But I remember generations before me at 50 and 60 years old, after their work days and work weeks were done, they had the energy to have gardens, cut their grass, go play golf. Average middle class people, not rich people, average middle class people, pick up a hobby like, model airplanes, the ones that you can fly, or dune buggies, or just, building stuff with wood, spending time with their kids, going on bike rides in the evenings after work. How come it seems like nowadays we're just too tired? Y'all notice that? Everybody says, well, Gen X and millennials and now Gen Z were lazy because if we buy a house, or even people with apartments or rental homes back then would still take care of their yards, or have like a flower bed or something. And now it's just you see a lot of these middle-aged down to younger people who own homes, or maybe have a townhome with a bit of landscaping on it, or maybe an apartment with a balcony, and a lot of them don't even hang pictures anymore. Why is that? Is it because we're lazy? Or is it because we're working 2/3 to 2 times, or 1.5 times to 2 times as hard to maintain the lifestyle that our parents and grandparents maintained 3 or 4 decades ago, and now we're having trouble even keeping up with that? I would even say up until 2008, you could still get by with a 40 or 50 hour week and enjoy a reasonable middle class lifestyle and have, like a nice lawn in your backyard and barbecues on Saturdays and have enough time to water your grass and cut it. But now, you're lucky if you could get up before noon on Saturday, if you have a Saturday and Sunday off, because you put in 60 to 80 hours the 5 days before. Some of us even 100 hours. So, let's talk about the Democrats and work, and why up until the GFC, a 40 to 50 hour work week would give you a reasonable lifestyle and an enjoyable quality of life. If y'all remember back in 2008, we slid into the GFC, which is the fault of Democrats. Yes, it happened on George Bush's watch, George W. Bush's watch, but it's the fault of Democrats. Why? Because in the late 1990s, while Bill Clinton was still in office, Congress mandated and the Equal Housing Opportunity Commission mandated that banks must figure out a way to finance subprime customers into being able to buy a home. So somebody who maybe has a median income but has a score of 550, or somebody who has a lower income but has a score of 660, 670, maybe even 700, but through conventional or even VA or FHA financing or USDA financing would find it difficult to be approved because of debt to income ratio or lower credit scores. This is where we get the subprime crisis, right? Oh, and we're doing it again. But it's called something else now. It's called buybacks. And now it's done privately through the developers. But it's pretty much, it's called an interest rate buyback. It's pretty much a very similar program. And within a few years, you're going to see another housing market crash, the likes of the GFC. It's already starting to turn because of the price of housing today. But because of the interest rate buybacks that are being done now, it functions. It's a different type of instrument. But in function to the consumer, to the mortgage payer, it's going to operate the same way, right? You know, where you pay a certain smaller payment for a number of years until you get a balloon payment when that interest rate buyback expires. So it's just a different way to skin that cat for affordability or challenged credit. So anyways, why are we working so much longer and harder? And why are we more fatigued? And our quality time with ourselves or our family or both to pursue home maintenance, yard maintenance, hobbies, going out to dinner with the family is elusive, and you feel so tired. Why is that? After the deliberately engineered crash of 2008, set in motion by the Democrats in the late 1990s, actually, I wouldn't even say the late 1990s, in the early 1990s, mid to early 1990s, before the contract with America. And this is one of the things that Newt Gingrich and his crew did not repair, did not catch, because they were fighting the Clintons. We got Obamacare. Well, what did Obamacare do? Other than the fact that it tried to mandate that everybody get health care, and for a number of years, several people didn't file their taxes because they couldn't afford to get health care. So they just paid their money to the IRS and didn't even try to get a tax return because they couldn't meet the mandate. There was a $4,000 penalty assigned with it and all that other stuff. Because of Obamacare, health care became exorbitantly expensive. So, initially, employers cut back as many employees as they could to less than 35 hours a week. It was not uncommon for somebody to work only 32 hours a week as a W-2 employee, because not only are you paying for your health care through a employer-sponsored program, your employer pays for it too. So as it became more expensive for you, it also became very expensive for them, which explains wage stagnation. Another thing that happened was the rise of 1099. So a way around this is to hire an employee as a contractor and pass all of the obligation of payroll tax and Social Security payments, which if you're 1099 you can opt out of, but onto the employee, who is now a contractor, all on their own. So instead of hiring a regular employee or W-2 employee that you have to show on your books and therefore have to cover payroll taxes and benefits that are now mandated by the federal government, all this other stuff, well, he's just a contractor. Because of these excess costs, wages stagnated. They rose a little bit during the Trump administration, and they've been rising somewhat now. And the reason being is because even though Trump did not do completely away with Obamacare, it's still a matter of law. The Supreme Court justices that he appointed were successful in eliminating the mandate, which offset some of that burden. So you could still be hired full time and opt out if you so choose. Okay? Or opt into a PPO or something like that. So Obamacare was no longer mandated, which gave employers and employees options to go back to a traditional HMO or PPO if they so desired. However, those PPOs and HMOs were still somewhat structured like Obamacare, so insurance is still more expensive. Okay? But because of the stagnation or lower increase of wages commensurate to the rate of inflation, largely because of energy policy, with the exception of the years of the Trump administration, where energy costs actually fell. And what we now call quantitative easing, which is basically just printing gobs of money and sending us into ever spiraling loads of public debt and rapid increase of the M2 money supply. Wages did not keep up commensurate with inflation since, and this is a composite, including the Trump years, although inflation fell significantly during the Trump years. the composite over the last 16 years, from 2009, actually 15 years, from 2009 until present, wages have not been keeping pace with inflation. Are you going to let me in? You're sitting here. Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, that's one reason, because what pay you are making doesn't go as far. So therefore, in order to maintain a semblance of the lifestyle that, say, your parents or your grandparents maintained, you have to work harder. Okay? You keep saying, or we keep hearing the Fed throw out this number of a 2% inflation rate as their target, which, that's an arbitrary number. Because if you go 2% year over year and compound that, that's still a significant loss of purchasing power. Under the Trump administration, in some points, we were running at 1% or less. But this was only for about 3.5 or 4 years, so it was not much of an offset when you compare that to now 3.5 years of Biden and 8 years of Obama. So your inflation rate, for example, cumulatively, now this is what the government is saying. These are the government numbers. So we know that they're higher than what they're reporting. Cumulatively, the government says that inflation has increased since 2021 to present. Composite about 30%. We know this is a lie because in some cases, fuel, food is 70 to 100% over what it was 3.5 years ago. So let's figure in on the cost of doing business of your employer, right? So it's more expensive for your employer to employ you. The wages that he can afford to pay you because of the growth of inflation are not commensurate to keeping up with the rate of inflation. And because of the cost that he has to cover to employ you and other people, he has to employ less of you. So most people nowadays, if they have a full-time job, if they're able to hold on to a full-time job, even if it's 1099, as opposed to working 8 to 10 hours a day, and now working 12 to 14 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week, sometimes even 16 hours a day. Mind you, this is to barely get into the house that mom and dad could have gotten into somewhere between 1970 and 2005. Think about that. Why are you so tired? Let's look at the years of cumulative Democratic control of the government from 2005 until now. 2006, the Democrat, or actually, yeah, we'll go from 2005 until now. 2006. No, actually, we're going to back this up from 1990. We're going to back this up from 1988 until now. In 1988, George H.W. Bush had a down-ticket victory coming off the heels of 8 years of the Reagan administration. And he was able to enjoy control of both the House and the Senate. And he managed to maintain that until 1992, at which point everything changed. Clinton came in with the Democrat House and Senate. And that stayed that way until 1994. So that's 2 years, or stayed that way until 1995. So 93 to 95, that's 2 years of absolute Democrat control. The Republicans took over the House and Senate in the 1994 election, and in 1995 they took over and stayed in control of the House and the Senate until 2002. Bill Clinton stayed in office until 2001, at which point it swung over to George W. Bush Jr. Actually, 2003 would be the switch over for Congress. In 2003, 2 years into his first term, George W. Bush maintained control of the House, but he lost the Senate because at that point in time, the Senate was an even 50-50 split, and Trent Lott gave up. Control of the Senate to Tom Daschle. Even though George W. Bush had a tiebreaker in the vice president at that time in the Senate. So technically, we had control of the Senate, but Trent Lott, the pussy, the former Democrat turned Republican, what we call a rhino, let Tom Daschle have it. So from 2003 until 2007, we had a Republican president, Republican House, Democrat Senate, and then in 2007, after the 2006 election, Bush lost the House as well. So we had some sort of Democrat leadership now for 2 years during Clinton, plus Clinton, so we'll call that 8 minus 2, let's say 6 effectively, right? And then we'll go, well, because of the way we'll go 2 years with Bush effectively, 2 years with Obama effectively, plus Obama maintained power in the presidency, even though the Republicans had the House and Senate, all the way up until 2018, the Democrat president for 8 years. So we'll go 6 years with Obama. So 2 and 6 is 8, plus 6 is 14. Go 1 with Trump because he lost the House and Senate in 2018. He was a pretty strong conservative leader. So 16, 17, 2 years under Biden, 18, 19. We're going to back this up all the way to 1988, right? So 1988 is 35, 19 of the 35 years ish, just on average, we've been under strong Democrat, or a stronger trending Democrat control. Why are you working so much harder? Do you get the picture now? 1980, we had a federal budget deficit of $1 trillion. By 1988, it was 2.5. And that was with all the, I want to say 2.5 or 3. And that was with all the excess spending that Reagan did in order to beat the Soviets in the Cold War. 1992, we had $4 trillion. So that was George W. Bush, or George H.W. Bush, fighting in Panama and the first Gulf War. So it was still manageable. Because, thank God, Newt Gingrich, the time Clinton left, it was 5. By the time George W. Bush left, it was 8. By the time Obama left, it was $22 trillion. 22. And some of that is due to the rate of inflation. A lot of that is because we were pulled off of the gold standard in 1971. Actually, yeah. And Bretton Woods and, a lot of other stuff. But, $22 trillion from 8. $14 trillion in 8 years under a Democrat president. Why are you having to work 60 to 80 to 100 hours a week? Some people 120. There's only 160. There's only 164 hours in a week. Have to do the math. Really? So for most people, that's enough time to go home, get something to eat, and go to bed. And have 1 to a day and a half off to wash your clothes, clean your house, and catch up on some sleep. And these employers, because of the cost of labor, because of the associated increasing costs of everything else, can only afford half to 2/3 of what they used to employ. This is why everybody's working 10 to 16-hour shifts, average of 12, versus 8-hour shifts, 10-hour shifts. But yet, Democrats are the friend of the working man. And the middle class and the working poor. And we have mental health crises. Because it's not possible for many of us, because we have to push so hard to keep up, to rest. And because of that, we have an uptick in mental health problems and domestic problems. How short is your temper when you're tired? Your spouse is also tired start getting sideways with each other. How much attention really can you give your children when you're that tired? With the little time that you do have with them. And what's the quality of that attention? Do you even have time for your family anymore? Could this be why women are the way that they are? Because they're tired. Because they now, in order for family to survive, not only does the man have to work 1.5 to 2 times as hard, but so does she. And she's stepping way outside of what she was built for. Don't get it twisted. Women in the workplace is not a new thing. It's really not. Okay. Lower income and middle class families have, to a degree, sometimes more, sometimes less, have had to have both people work either full-time or part-time throughout history. That's not a new thing. Okay. But isn't mom in a better mood? She only has to work 4 to 8 hours a day versus 10 to 16. Because she's geared more towards being the caretaker of her husband and her children. Does that affect the domestic dynamic and the mental health of her in the home? Or even her as a single woman? And her attitude? Maybe that affects the dynamic of the relationship because mom and dad, boyfriend or girlfriend, no longer have the time that they need, even if it's just a few hours a week, to invest in each other and build their relationship. That could explain why church, mosque, or synagogue attendance is down, because they're just too tired. So they're not able to participate in the spiritual and social benefits of that as well. Oh, but the Democrats are the friend of the working man. You know what this is a lot like? It's almost like we've not been progressive, as they call themselves, at all. In the least. It's like we've gone backwards to the environment of, I don't know, the coal mines of West Virginia, or the steel mines of or the steel mills of Pennsylvania, or the railroad workers here I don't know, in Kansas, right? Where they were paid a barely survivable wage. And we're working 12 to 16 hour shifts, 7 days a week. And they died young or were disabled young. What are we going to do next? We're going to put children back in the textile mills again? Is this how Democrats or is this where the progressive Democrats are leading us? At that point in time, women were pulling long shifts in the plants too, as were children. Is that what we're going back to? Is that going forward? Are the Democrats the friend of the working man by setting up a situation to which their employers are forced to do this just to stay alive? And the workers are forced to do this just to stay alive? Is that where we're headed? Even farmers. Up until recently, up until the Obama years, even farmers, when they had to work 24-hour days during sowing and harvesting, and yeah, they had to get up at dark 30 in the morning to take care of their livestock if they had it, but seasonally, they got breaks to where, yeah, they worked several 24-hour days or 18-hour days for 7 days a week for maybe a month at a time, but in between the harvest, in between planting and harvest, and in between harvest and the next planting, as long as they just tended the small tasks, they could pull off a few hours a day and get a period of rest. Even working livestock, they had shorter days seasonally. They might even had, depending on what they were doing, might even had a little bit of time to take a small vacation. Now they can't do that because when it's not field time or livestock time, now they got to go into town and at least work part-time, so they don't even get rest. Or just to survive, they have to, instead of doing 1 or 2 crops a year, now they got to do 3 or 4. Instead of just doing cattle, now they have to do cattle and soybeans and wheat and then maybe corn. Or cattle and mutton, then soybeans. So they just, wow. Or cattle and hogs and then soybeans. They just, and because we're not rotating or allowing fallow time for soil like we used to, maybe the quality of our food is decreasing and we have to add artificial stuff just to make it grow and produce, which affects our health. Oh, but the Democrats are the working man's friend. Democrats are the farmer's friend. You do know that every year a field is good for 1 or 2 plantings at most, and then it needs about 3 to 6 months, depending on what you're growing, of fallow time just to rest, right? Soil actually needs time to rest. And if you're really smart, Some fields you'll let rest for a whole year and just plant the other ones and you'll rotate that out. But because of the pressure that everybody's on, now we got to work that soil year round, year after year after year after year, and work the people who are working that soil all the time. And then they have to do additional stuff just to earn the capital to stay alive. And it affects the quality. It affects the quality of the soil and the quality of our food, because in order to make up for what nature would have normally done, if we didn't have to push so hard just to keep our heads afloat, we gotta add chemicals, genetically alter the plants, and steroids. And that farmer doesn't get his rest time, and even that worker. And more of them can't even keep up anymore, and then they have to sell to Bill Gates, China, Monsanto, and then they just get the hirelings that they can pay for as little as possible. That they massively bring over the border. Work them like slaves. Oh yeah, but the Democrats love the illegals. What illegals aren't being traded as domestic slave labor. They're not being paid at all, or being paid just shit. Or field workers just being paid shit. Or sex workers. Let's not even go into what's going on with the children. But we had a civil rights movement and a civil war to end slavery in this country. Oh, but the Democrats are your friends. Even Cesar Chavez, who unionized the migrant workers, the legal migrant workers of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, was against that. He called it slavery. Cesar Chavez wasn't against illegal immigration because he hated Mexicans. He himself was a Mexican American. And the migrants he unionized were legal migrant workers here in the United States, working the fields either as new American citizens or under work visas under the Procedo program, which was stopped under Democrat Jimmy Carter. He was trying to protect those migrant workers from being worked and treated like slaves. See, it's great that they have illegal migrant workers and framers in this country with no legal status, that they can pay cash under the table, or even if they do pay them W-2 wages, it's a pittance. But see, just like the black slaves in the Antebellum pre-Civil War period, in effect, unless they have a visa, which most of them don't, they don't have a legal status in this country. On paper, they don't exist. So it's not just about getting a new voting bloc in here, which it is. It's the Democrat Party all over again being about slavery. They know damn well they can't get away with it with the black people anymore. So we'll play on the desperation of our neighbors in second and third world countries to our south. Or if they manage to come from other places, that's all fine too. And we'll put them on the truck farms in Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, California, Colorado, Louisiana, Oklahoma, running cattle, cutting sugar cane, baling cotton, pulling sugar beets, pulling chilies, tomatoes, lettuce, pecans, tobacco, for a pittance of a wage. And we can get away with this because they have no legal status. And where do they live? Well, most of them live off campus, but even if they're in the bunkhouse, they can only afford to live in squalor. And they have to draw, if they can, food stamps. But we can get away with it because they really have no legal status and no voice. Wow, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Black people, why are you not against illegal immigration? Why? Do you really understand what's going on here? It's not that you're being replaced, which you are, but you've been down this road before. And all they're doing is just doing it to somebody else. Oh, yes. They pay them, they don't put them in chains, but still, in many ways, the same. And all that truck farm owner has to do, all that coyote has to do if he's running domestics, or even child slaves, even child sex slaves. Do this, or I send you home. You have no recourse. And many of them go into unpayable debts just to get here. So, the Bible says the debtor, in a very literal sense, is slave to the lender. And in this case, that is absolutely true. You understand? That's the life of an illegal immigrant. I know a few immigrants who are on the DACA program. That was supposed to be a fast track to citizenship. Remember that? They're still waiting for their status. When did they start DACA? 2014? 10 years later, they have not been able to progress one iota towards that which they were promised. That's awful funny. And I know this because I work in the trade, so I am around these people. While it makes me angry that yes, we are being invaded from the south for lots of nefarious purposes, and amongst those slaves are coming criminal elements, because this is all criminal. Democrats promised them something and have yet to deliver. Why? Because even under the DACA program, if they were to get that, unless they have Stockholm syndrome, they have the opportunity not to be under that thumb anymore, because then they'll have a status. Then they'll be able to have recourse. They won't be fodder. They won't be slaves. Oh, well, the slaves worked for free. Yeah. Some of them did draw some pay, but it wasn't much. But even the plantation owners weren't as cruel, because even though it wasn't great, they were at least given one day off a week and provided with a place to live. So yeah, they were paid, they just weren't paid enough. So now that I've painted that picture, these Democrats, in regards to illegal aliens, have just completely 100% unwound the American Civil War. And you can go into the American fields today, particularly in the South, in the Southwest, and even in liberal California in the Central Valley, and see it all over again. And that's the bleeding heart version of the appeal on why to end illegal immigration. Because this country's a victim. We're all victims of it, because it undercuts our wages and our ability to compete, because the labor market is being flooded. But in many ways, those people are also victims too. Do you think that those people are going to continue? Let's say that the Democrats stay in power. Let's play this little game. You think that they're going to continue to get those exorbitant payouts ad infinitum forever? No, they're not. Eventually, they'll disperse throughout the country. And even those people will find themselves cleaning houses, working for less than minimum wage, framing houses. Or in the hot sun in an orchard or a field. See, that's the old bait and switch. So even they, at a point in time, will be victims of this too. Because see, they're being abused as well. You see, that's how Satan operates, right? He promises you the moon And sin is fun for a while until it's not fun anymore. And then he's got you. And there's no way out. That's your Democrat Party for you. So when you pick up an apple, actually they're as far north as Washington State. You pick up an apple out of your fruit basket today, or you go buy those fresh pecans, or even those shelled pecans in a bag, or the piñon nuts or the walnuts, make you a pie or some brownies, and fresh Georgia peaches. This t-shirt, if it's made with American cotton, probably made in China, but the cotton might be from here. That brand new McMansion that you bought, yeah, that was built by a slave class. So, if you're a Democrat and you support all of these progressive programs, do me a favor. Please, go to an old national cemetery. For instance, since I'm now going around the city of Santa Fe on the Loop Highway, for instance, here in Santa Fe or Arlington, maybe some of the old national cemeteries up on the East Coast and in the Midwest, go find a Union soldier's grave. Whip out your dick, take a piss on it, turn around, drop your drawers, squat down, and take a shit on his gravestone. Because that's what you did. That's what you did. Not only are you hurting the American worker, but even those who are in the fancy hotels in Chicago and New York now, all those are just holding camps for slaves. Eventually, as they go back out into the economy, that's where they're going to wind up. And they'll never see, as long as there's Democrats in office, they'll never see the completion of a legal status, ever. Or if they do, they'll have to fight awful hard to get it. That's on purpose. Think about that. So it hurts us and them at the pleasure of the plantation owners, the elites. Oh, yes, sir. A couple of years ago, in a trailer park in Albuquerque, New Mexico, a couple of coyotes rented 2 trailers out as their primary residence. Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department, for a good amount of time, getting complaints from these people's neighbors. And they were 2 trailers adjacent to each other. They finally decided to go over there and check it out. finally did, and they entered those trailers, were 27 Latin women, ages 12 to 61, housed in those trailers on mattresses on the floor. They had no ID. They had barely enough food and water to live off of. Unfortunately, we live in a place where Spanish is still spoken, so a number of the officers, a number of the sheriff's deputies, and this was a county sheriff operation because APD doesn't cooperate with the Border Patrol because Albuquerque is a sanctuary city, so this had to be done by the sheriff's department. APD fought them on it, but anyways, these deputies engaged these women. This is what they were told. Most of them had families in their home country. Most of them were from countries other than Mexico. The two renters of the house were members of MS-13. And some of these women had been, especially the older ones, operating in Albuquerque since the 2000s. Hadn't seen their families in years, hadn't been able to contact their families in years. Here's what they did. They walked Central Avenue to turn tricks, or they were hired out as domestics, or both. And then they were forced to give their earnings, minus like $10 or $15 a week, to go buy candy and maybe a soda pop and a box of tampons. To these individuals. They're minders, they're masters. And they were told this because they were told that they had to pay off the debt that was owed to them for bringing them into the United States. And that once they paid off their debts, then they could reach out and bring their families up. Well, the funny thing is some of these women had been doing it for decades and had not paid off their debts, they say. The point is they never were. County Sheriff's Department estimates that there are several other dens of iniquity operating within the Albuquerque metropolitan area that they have yet to discover or have the opportunity to raid. What would you classify those women as? Or those girls? And see, if they got pregnant in their trade, right, they were never offered the opportunity to keep their child. Where did they go? Planned Parenthood. They have a number of clinics in the Albuquerque area. One of their clinics, until recently, was really close to that trailer park. I could go on. Democrats, friend to the working man, right? Progressive, freedom-loving, they say. And black people, Hispanic people even, wow, say that they're simpatico with the plight of the immigrant. You're voting for this? A progressive Republican would at least try, even though a progressive Republican would try, even though we know it's not favored by or in the interest of the citizens of this country, would at least try to find a way to give those people status. Keep them here. Okay. You could make an argument for that. Donald Trump would try to send them home. Not because he's evil or mean or racist, but because that's home. And many of them, once they get up here and they discover that they're in a trap, yes, a lot of them send money home. And those are remittances paid back into those countries. But a lot of that remittance doesn't even go to their families. It goes to the coyotes who say, with a threat to the safety of their family, that they're owed a debt. Which for some odd reason, it just never really completely paid off, right? It would be merciful to deport them, most of them. Because a lot of them are, in fact, some sort, not blatantly, because we can't use chains anymore. See? Or can we? Slaves. What party, again, was founded in the 1850s, leading up to the Civil War to end slavery? Oh yeah, the Republicans, that's right. I forgot. Black people, you should be ashamed of yourselves. You really should. You should be smarter than this. Because this is the new version, the updated version, the politically correct version of what happened to your ancestors. Just like the master did back in the day, and curried favor with the women and got all cozy with the women. To emasculate your men. Your women are still falling for this today, not recognizing that this is a very similar plight to their ancestors as well. Think about this. Think about all of it. And you limousine white liberals, I know most of you. Some of you live here in Santa Fe. Will say, oh, but we love these people and we want to give them asylum and bring them here. But unless they're doing something specifically in your home for a pittance of a wage, you won't even sit next to them at a McDonald's. Or even try to learn their language to where you could at least communicate with them. Because that's beneath you, right? That tells us exactly who you are. You are not the anti-racist. No. It's the new Jim Crow. Y'all still treat the black people the same way. You just put pillows around it now. And treat them with the bigotry of low expectations. Wow. Evil, evil, evil. The devil doesn't change his stripes. He never has. It's the exact same ploy used in the garden. Are you sure that's what God said? Oh, you shall not surely die. You'll become like God. And then once you fall for it, once these people who are right now just enjoying the benefits of being in the lap of luxury in New York City, once they're disseminated out into the economy, it'll be just like Adam and Eve all over again. Once they're out from under that cover, once they get assimilated, as the left would like to call it, into the economy, they're going to be like Adam and Eve and discover just how naked they are and the slaves that they will be. And they'll be stuck. Most of those people eventually too want to go home. Because they know under the current system, unless things drastically change, that DACA was a lie. It was an appeasement. Gave them just a little bit, but they're never going to get there completely. Almost like they do the black people under the Great Society. Isn't that funny? Matter of fact, they're using a lot of that same structure to do that to those people. Only this time, once those people are turned loose, well, enjoy your apples and your oranges. Even your steak. Because a good percentage of the working cowboys in the Southwest, yeah, a good percentage of those people working in the hog farms for less than market wages, feedlots for less than market wages, living in a flop house because they can't afford anything else, and they really can't complain because they have no status legally. Because they have no status, they have no recourse. They can't even vote their way out of it. That's on purpose. And it hurts us, the average American, too, because those are jobs that we could do, but as citizens, as people of status, as people of recourse, we would expect to be doing those jobs with a measure of dignity and with a measure of, okay, I'm selling my time and my body and my talents to you, so that way I can feed my family at a livable wage. See, that's why they do that. These people are slaves. They are. Think about it. they can be paid squalor and take a job from us, but they can be paid squalor and they can be treated that way because they have no legal status in this country. And the Democrats, even though they say that, oh yeah, we're going to put in this program to do that for you, do this for you, but in reality, it's never really going to come. And those being housed in those places in Chicago and New York, that's just a camp, a glorified, very glorified camp. Almost like being held before the auction block. And once they're released out into the economy, well, we'll know where they'll go. So, Democrats, do me a favor today, if you will, please. Go to a national cemetery that's at least 150 years old. They're all across the southern tier of the country, from California east. There's one in Colorado, up in Denver. You can find them all over the Midwest, all over the Northeast. Go find the nearest one, Democrats. Go find the grave of a Union soldier, preferably one who died during the Civil War. Take a shit, or, excuse my language, defecate and urinate on his grave. Please do that today. Please. Will you? It's AL-BINO. Signing.